What's going on, man? Thanks for joining my session. Let me just do some final setup here. I was on Twitch at the same time. Let me let me exit out of Twitch real quick. All right. You know what? Let's just get started. It's 10 o'clock, and give me 1 second. I'm still trying to set up my environment. There we go. All right, thank you so much for joining me. There's a few of you, so thanks for being patient. Thanks for joining. This course is supposed to be a super basic intro to coding. The idea is that, like in case you're curious about what it takes to become a programmer, and also go over like the very core fundamentals, because I've noticed that if you don't get the core fundamentals right in programming, that it will be a lot tougher down the road. So it's very important to start off your code learning journey the right way. And that's what the purpose of this course is, partially. It's to get you guys to start thinking like a programmer, or be exposed to it, and kind of get set a strong foundation. So your learning journey, coding learning journey becomes a lot easier. And I've noticed that there's literally only like less than a handful, or less than a dozen concepts in programming that are incredibly important, that you have to understand well in order to do well down the road. Because what's going to happen is, as you learn more about coding, and you start learning about frameworks, you start learning about web development, APIs, and all that other stuff. If you don't get the fundamental part right, you're going to struggle with that aspect a lot more. So that's why it's very important to start off strong, and make sure you get the fundamentals right. So I chose JavaScript for the language. There's many different programming languages out there. Most of you already know that. I chose JavaScript just because it's a popular language. It's a web-based language, so a lot of the web development projects are based on JavaScript. And I'm a big fan of JavaScript. I know Java as well. Java is another language that I like to teach in, that I like to program in. But for the purpose of this intro class, I picked JavaScript. So let's get to it. Let's just get started. So I just wanted to go over literally only, let me see. There's literally only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 things that I wanted to go over. So let's start off actually by talking about what I have up here. So what I have up is a site called REPL. It's REPL.it, to be more specific. And all it is, it's just a site. It's an online compiler. It allows you to write code in the browser and run it in the browser. So you don't have to download anything. You don't have to run anything on your local machine. everything happens through the browser online, remotely. So nothing runs on your computer. So it's very, I'm a big fan of this site. There's other sites like it. This is one of my favorites. So a lot of times when I do tutoring, co-tutoring, what I do is I just pull up REPL to teach something quick. So like if there's a quick concept, a short concept, I'll be like, oh, okay, let's pull up REPL and let's just do it on REPL. Or if somebody has a homework assignment, then what we usually do is we do it on REPL first, and then we go back to whatever editor we were using. So here it is. It's REPL. It's make sure you have you have JavaScript selected for the language, because REPL supports many different languages. I have JavaScript selected. On the left-hand side, you see index.js. That's just the file. That's what this file is right here. Everything that you see in here, that's index.js. On the right-hand side is an output terminal, meaning anything that you output, anything that you print in the programming gets outputted to the right-hand side right here. So, all right, let's get to it. I want to keep it as simple, as basic as I can. I'll try my best. It's hard to do because what's going to happen as a developer, as you learn more, as you become a better developer, as you gain more knowledge, it's very hard to stick to the basics, but I'm going to try to remember not knowing anything about coding. And let's just do that. So, okay, so like as I've mentioned before, there's literally only 7 things I wanted to go over. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is comments. What is a comment? So everything you type in here gets interpreted, by the way. So if I type a single letter, the letter A, that gets interpreted by REPL in this case, by the compiler. In this case, not a compiler, but I don't want to be too specific. It gets interpreted by whatever is trying to run the code. So every letter, every character matters in programming. That's very important to understand as a new developer. Like, unlike human communication, if I say something slightly off or slightly incorrectly, you will still understand me. There's a good chance you'll still understand me. But with programming, you have to be exact. It has to be exactly right. Every space matters, every character matters, everything matters. So let's start off by introducing the first programming concept called comments. This is a comment in JavaScript, 2 forward slashes. So whenever you see 2 forward slashes, it gets ignored by the compiler or interpreter in this case. Everything you write after this, it doesn't matter what it is, gets ignored. So it's not run. But if I did this, this gets ignored, it actually won't. Because the interpreter will try to run this, and it will think that this is actual code, but it's not. So it will fail. So if I hit run right here, it should throw an error message. And there it is. So it's very important that you understand that every character that you write in this editor will get interpreted, will get compiled depending on the language. So first concept, again, for the person that just joined us, is a comment. So a comment is just, what is a comment? It's just something that gets ignored. So if you want to like have a comment regarding an upcoming code line, you have a code coming up and you just want to comment on it, you just do 2 forward slashes. That's it. So it gets ignored. So the first concept is comments. So the 6 concepts that we're going to go over today are, first one is console log, or also known as print statements or print statement. The second concept is types, different types of objects, if you will, and I'll go over what that is. Then I want to talk about variables. Variables, and again, I'll go over all of these here in a second. Then we have arrays, and then we have loops and functions. And then I have 2 smaller things related to, I was thinking of doing a small exercise at the end, a rock, paper, scissors game to be more specific. And for that, we're going to use 2 other additional concepts. These are kind of like add-ons. The first one is a prompt statement, which gets information or data from the user. Prompt, that is. And the other one is math.random, which generates a random number. So those are kind of like add-ons. But I want to the most important things are console logs, types, variables, arrays, loops, and functions. And just those few concepts, believe it or not, you can actually do quite a bit. It's like the very fundamental part of programming. It's like you're building a house, and it's the very root of it. It's the very beginning. It's just laying the foundation. It's setting the ground. And you can actually create a bunch of small games just doing this. So if you get and if you're thinking of becoming a developer, if you think of becoming a coder, you have to understand these things inside and out. They have to just like be super clear. If you're confused about this, I would not recommend moving on until you get a better understanding of them. And sometimes you have to just start coding and start doing things. Then some of these things will make more sense, and that's fine too. So let's move on. Let's just get started. So what is a console log? Console log prints something to the screen. So this gets printed. So if I run this, so this, I know it looks weird, this console, then there's a dot, and then there's a log, there's parentheses. I can imagine if you're a brand new developer, if you've never seen code before, I can imagine this looks pretty weird. So what this is basically saying is like, print this to the screen. What is the screen? It's this right here on the right-hand side. This console, this terminal right here. So if I run this, it's going to print out just this gets printed, nothing else. So this is simple, right? It's just printing something to the screen. Make sure, okay, which actually leads me to my next point. This right here is a string. So you can also print out a number. So if I wanted to print out the number 22, this will print out 22. And the same happens if I put it around strings. I mean, around quotes, that is. It will print out 22. So both do the same thing. So you might be asking, what's the difference between a string and a number? A string is just text. It's just anything that you just want to print out, a message or a name or whenever you're dealing with just regular text, just everyday language, you want to put it around quotes. You can use double quotes or single quotes, but we're just going to use double quotes because we don't want to confuse you. So simple, right? So that's console log right there. Next is types. There's different types of objects or entities in programming. So I just mentioned two, right? I mentioned numbers and strings. So strings are text, and there are usually string uses quotes. So strings are just text. Just every time I think of everyday language, everyday stuff that we, the way we talk, I think of strings. Numbers, as it suggests, are just numbers. That's it. By itself, they're just naked numbers. There's nothing around it. There's no parentheses, no square brackets, no nothing. It could be anything. Those are numbers. The other type I was going to go over is booleans. What are booleans? It's a funny word, but all it is just they're just, for booleans, there's literally only two values. Isn't that incredible? You can only have two values for boolean, either true or false. So booleans are there's literally nothing else. It's either literally just true without quotes, without anything, just the word true naked without anything, and the word false without anything. And statements, and we'll go a little bit more into it, but for all you need to know for now is that booleans are either true or false. What else? There's many different types, not just in JavaScript, in any programming language, but I'm just going to go over the most important ones. Another very important one of the most important types of objects in programming is arrays. What are arrays? Array is a collection of things. The way I look at it, array is a bucket. It's a container that holds more than one item. So So if I wanted to, let's say an array looks something like this. One of the defining characteristics of an array are square brackets. And it can hold more than one value. You can have one value, in this case, just the number 34, or it can have multiple values. And it can have as many as you like. So it's a collection of things. An array represents a collection of things, because sometimes you're not referring to a single thing, but you're referring to a collection of things. Like, for example, grades, right? Like a lot of times, a lot of these courses, they use the example of grades in a class. You know, there's you can have many different grades for a single student, or you can have many different grades for a whole class. So that's where arrays come in. It's one form of storing multiple values. Okay, so those are the different. Those are some of the different types of objects, I guess. In JavaScript. And this is just to reiterate, this is just printing out something to the screen. Simple, right? So far, all we have is we have a console log. We went over console log. We went over comments, console logs, and types. So let's go over variables. What is a variable? And some of you might have heard some of these concepts already, and that's fine. It never hurts to rehear them or reinterpret them by somebody else, because sometimes certain aspects of it are not very clear till you hear it from somebody else. So it's fine if you heard these things before. We're just going to go over it again. So what is a variable? It's actually quite simple. It's just something that represents a value. So it's a name to something else. It's like a pointer. It's like saying like let's say let name equals, and then let's say see I'm using double quotes, so that's a string. And let's say the name is Sam. So now every time you call a name, it represents Sam. So you don't have to say Sam anymore. You can just say name. And you don't use the quotes. You just use name by itself. That's very important. So I see a lot of, I still see new students get confused about quotes and variable names and things like that, but it's actually quite simple. So from now on, name represents Sam. So if I do a console log right here, and inside the console log, instead of a string, I just have name in it, what do you expect to happen? It will print out Sam, right? It will just Sam by itself, nothing else. So let's do that. Let's run it. And there it is. I could have done this, and I can comment this out. So if I do console log Sam, same thing. It's going to print out Sam. So you might be asking, why would anybody do this instead of this? It's actually quite simple. And I don't know if you guys want to think about it for a second. Why would somebody use this over they call this hard-coded, over the hard-coded version? It's actually quite simple. It's because the name can now be repeated throughout the code. Imagine if you had thousands of references to the same name, Sam. Can you imagine like having to change at some point, the name changes from Sam to Sammy or something like that, or to Mo, and then now you would have to go in and change every instance of Sam to Mo, right? So that's not optimal, obviously. So that's why variables are so important, because all you have to do is just change the name in one place, and it gets reflected everywhere else, if of course you use it the correct way, in such a way, that is. Now you only have to change it in one place, right? So that's one of the reasons why we have variables. There's many other reasons, but this is one of the very important reasons why we have variables in programming. All right, let's move on. And oh yeah, a couple more things on variables. It can hold different types. So it doesn't have to be just a string. So let's say let age equals 34. And so it can hold a number. It can also hold, how about that, let's say Sam has a few kids. It can also hold a few. It can also, you can also have an array as a variable type. And so let's say now you can have an array as a variable type. You can have a string. You can have a number. So there's other types. But like I said, I just want to stick to the very basic ones, because really at the beginning you don't want to get bombarded with too much information. You want to keep it simple, and you want to just stick to the very important fundamental parts. So with that said, what else? So those are variables. And oh, by the way, if you ever see something like var instead, like if you ever see something like this, and let's say if you ever see something like this, a var instead of a let, don't let that confuse you. That's just part of JavaScript updating itself, and let is just a newer way of doing it. So you're going to encounter that a lot, by the way. You're going to see things, you've learned things one way, and then you look up a tutorial and, it's using it different term, different, they're doing things differently. And it's just because maybe that's just an updated version. But a lot of times they're not mutually exclusive, which means that you can still use the old way. Like in this case, var, you can use var. A lot of people still use var. Actually, my favorite site, W3 Schools, for some reason still uses var. So that's completely fine. Or you can use let. I prefer, if you can, my philosophy is if you can use the latest and greatest, use the latest and greatest. Don't stick to the old one just because you're used to it, if that makes sense. So what is next? So we have variables. We talked. We haven't talked about arrays. Let's just quickly talk about arrays a little bit more specifically, because it is an important concept. And let me just. So arrays, again, just real quick. Let's say we save an array to a variable. So so this is one way to create an array. You will get, arrays are very confusing, especially as a new developer, because you'll see it being created in different ways, being used in different ways. But what's important is, as a new developer, you just stick to the most important parts, which is every array pretty much has square brackets in some way or form. So square brackets is a defining characteristic of an array, in my opinion. When I think arrays, I think square brackets. And when I think square brackets, I think arrays. And that's generally true. So arrays, square brackets. So let's say we have an array, and those are, it has a bunch of numbers. By the way, in JavaScript, you can mix the types in the array. So you can have a collection of numbers mixed with strings. So I can do this. I can have, and you can even have a variable in there, maybe like that. So look how mixed this looks. So that's possible. It's not good programming. That's why a lot of programming languages don't allow that, because it makes sense. You don't want mixed items in an array. That will break code. It will make your code less robust, and it will introduce bugs. So it's always good, to, generally speaking, to have an array of the same type. So if you're going to have an array of numbers, have an array of numbers. So in regards to array, so let's say I wanted to console log the second item in the array. How do you do that? Well, you call on the name of the array, followed by square brackets, and inside the square brackets, you put the location of the number or the item that you want to print, or you want access to, in this, more generally speaking. So let's say I want to print out the second one. So the second one, you would think it's 2, right? But it's not. In programming, every array starts at 0. So it's actually 1. 0, 1. So this will print out the first element, the second element of the array. So if I run this, by the way, let's make sure this code doesn't cause a bug or doesn't cause an error message. It doesn't. If I run this, actually, you know what? Let's comment this out. And let's just run this. This should print out 565. And there it is, 565. Okay, so this is how you declare an array. This is how you access an array. And what else? There's many things you could do with an array. Accessing array. There's like these fancy functions that are built in that you can use. But I don't want to go over those just yet. I just want to keep it simple. How to declare an array, how to access an array. And there's actually, let me just show you one more, maybe how to add to an array. So let's say I wanted to add the number 34. And let's say afterwards, I want to print out the new array. So I'll do a console log array. Let's get rid of this. So this should give us, actually, let's pick a different number that we haven't used. Let's say the number 44. And let's say after I add the number 44, I want to console log the whole array to make sure it works. So let's run it. And there it is. And actually, you know what? So if I do a console log before it, just so we can see how it looks before and after. So this is before, and then I add the number 44, then I print it again. So now when I run it, you expect two arrays to be printed, one with the number 44 at the end and one without it. And there it is. All right. So very basic array stuff, nothing crazy, nothing. But it's so important to understand these basic things, like how to access a certain member of the array, how to push something, and like removing is a little bit more complicated, so I'm not going to go over it. So I'm just going to, so we just access the array, create the array, and pushing to it. All right. So next up is loops. So loops are confusing to a lot of new developers. REPL is just loading right now. So loops are confusing to a lot of people because it looks weird. A loop, what is a loop? So a loop is basically going through a. Somebody just asked, "Is this real?" Yes, it's real. It's real and live. Yeah. So, by the way, for the person asking or anybody who's new, yeah, I'm a coding tutor. This is what I do on a regular basis. So I figured, why not just go over some of the stuff with everybody, anybody who wants to watch it. So, anyways, so a loop is doing something for a certain number of times. So let me just 1 second. So if you wanted to do something 5 times, for example, let me show you how to do something. So if you want to repeat something 5 times. So this is, by the way, this is one of the most popular loops there is. It's called the for loop. And the way you set, let me set it up first, and then I'll go over what each part means, because it looks kind of confusing. So I want to do something 5 times, right? And let's say 5 times I want to print out I just want to print out hi. So this should print out the statement hi 5 times, right? There it is. Well, and now let's go over what this means. So a for loop, like I said, is one of the most popular loops there is. There's many different types of loops. There's a while loop. That's another popular one. There's a for each loop, which is specific to arrays. But if it's important to get really comfortable with for loops. And the way it works is there's 3 statements inside the for loop. There's this statement, there's this statement, and then there's this statement. And what this is saying is start at 0, check each time if I is less than 5. As long as it's less than 5, continue running the code between the square brackets. And each time after each iteration, go ahead and increase I by 1. So I starts at 0. It checks if it's less than 5. It is. It runs it. That it increases by 1. So now I is 1. And it checks, is it less than 5? Yes, it is. Then it runs the statement. And you can have many different statements. You can have whatever you like in here. It's a set of code, a set of instructions inside of it. So basically do something 5 times. But what if we just wanted to print out I itself? What do you expect to happen? You expect it to print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because I starts at 0 and it ends at 5. It doesn't include 5. It stops at 5. So it will not include 5. That's very important to understand. Believe it or not, these small things actually matter in programming. So if I run this, I should see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I change this to less than and equal to 5, and I run it, it will include 5 now. Okay, so this is a very basic loop. So loop is to repeat something a certain number of times, but also it is to also access a certain member of an array. That's where a lot of times loops are being used, especially for loop. So what happens is you need to go through, let's say you wanted to add a number to, let's say you wanted to print out each element, so 34, 565, and 56 to the screen. So how would you do that? Well, you don't print out I, because I is just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You would print out, before we print out anything, we need to adjust this. So instead of stopping at 5, we just need to go from 0, 1, 2. We need to stop at 2. But that's not the right way, because that's called being hard-coded. We don't want to hard-code this. We want to use r.length. R.length is just the length of the array. So this is not hard-coded. If you did this is called hard-coding it. But we don't want to hard-code it. We want to do r.length. So we want to stop at the length of the array. And we want to print out each element as we iterate, as we loop through it. We want to print out each element. How do we do that? What's the name of the array? And we talked about this briefly a few minutes ago. So it's the name of the array, square brackets, and then the location you want to, in this case, print out. And what is the location? Well, it's I. That's the reason why we did this for loop. It's so we could use this I. So now if I run it, it should print out. And I give you a second to think about it. What should it print out? It's 34, 565, 56, the content of the array. And there it is. So if you ever need to do something to an array, each element to an array, or you want to access each element of the array and you don't want to skip any one, this is one way to do it. It's a for loop. All right. Let me know if I'm going too fast, too slow. I can adjust my pace a little bit too. What is next? Now comes actually a very, very interesting part, very interesting concept in programming called a function. What is a function? I know some of you might oh, I already know what a function is. It's pretty straightforward. You might have done tutorials or whatever, or you might have read an article, but it's very important to truly understand what it is. It's like you gotta, if you're gonna become a programmer, you really gotta understand what every aspect of it, not just kind of understand it. If you want to be a good developer, that is. And that's the point of part of the reason why I'm doing this class, is to help you guys have a much stronger understanding of these things. So a function starts off with the keyword function. So JavaScript, see how it highlighted blue? It's because JavaScript knows that's a special word. You cannot use that word anywhere else. If you write the word function, it knows it's something specific is coming up. Function, then the name of the function, right? So by the way, two of the most popular placeholders in computer science are foo and bar. So if you ever don't know what to call something, foo and bars are actually popular computer science placeholders. So this is how a function is set up. The keyword function, the name, parentheses, and curly braces. So a function, you can have anything inside of it that you like. So let's say let's do a variable called name. And let's make the name Robbie. And let's print out that name, Robbie. So, okay, so what I'm about to introduce is one of the most confusing things to new developers. And I've seen new developers still struggle with this months into their learning. And it's really fascinating because it's a very important concept to understand. In programming, there's this concept of defining something, and then there's the concept of executing something. This right here is defining something, meaning this does not get run. Like if this name, Robbie, console log Robbie, if I run this, we actually won't see Robbie being printed to the screen. It will actually not be shown. And do you guys understand why? It's because this function is just a definition, meaning it's just there. There's a blueprint of it, but it's never been called on. You still have to call on it. So without calling on it, nothing will happen. So that's where you call on it. So how do you call on it? It's actually quite simple. You just do the name of the function followed by parentheses. You need the parentheses. This is not like a variable. So now if I run it, name. Oh, there's my first mistake. It's not Robbie, it was name, right? It's good to run into this. So it's saying, like, if I had Robbie in here, which is like, this is a common mistake people would make every day in programming. So you would do something like this because you're typing too fast, you're too eager to get, your code to work. So you type in what the value is rather than what the variable name is, and you get something like this. And it's good to look at. This is actually a very important part of programming, is to understand error messages. So it says over here, reference error, Robbie is not defined. And it even tells you what line it's on. It will tell you it's on line 34. It will tell you right here that there's something wrong. And it says, like, I don't know what Robbie is. And then you look at it and you're like, yeah, where would Robbie come from? Robbie doesn't make any sense because there's no variable named Robbie. There's a string named Robbie, but there's no variable. So let's change this back. Let's change this to name, which represents Robbie. And let's run it. And now we should be able to see Robbie. Okay. And so again, this is so important. I cannot stress this enough. Calling versus execution. Versus definition. This defining a function, and this is calling it. It's the same as if you had a variable. And look, by the way, look, I have another variable called name. How is that possible that I have two variables with the same name? And I'm going to go over that here in a second. So if I do another name called Malik, and I do and I call console, and I do console log name, can anybody figure out? And let's get rid of this for a second. Can anybody figure out what's going to print? Like if I do, there's a name called Robbie, and there's a name. And actually, you know what? Let's make it a little more interesting. Let's move this further down here. I like that. Anybody want to guess? Feel free to put it in the comments section or the chat within YouTube if you guys want to guess. What is it going to print? Well, it's either going to print Malik or it's going to print Robbie. So anybody want to guess? If not, it's fine. Well, Malik was declared first, but Robbie is declared or initialized second. So you would think it's Robbie just because of the order of execution, but it's actually Malik. And the reason for that is because this, remember what I said about this? This is just the scope of, okay, this has to do actually, let me back up a little bit. This has to do with scopes. There's a term called scopes. So this name is only local to this function foo. So anything within the curly braces, it's only visible within that. So it's not visible outside of that. It's not visible to the outside world. So that's why this, first of all, doesn't throw an error message. And it will print out Malik instead of Robbie, even though Robbie was declared second. But it's because it's inside of this function, the scope is very limited to that part. So if I do, let's make it more interesting. What if I do this? Let name equals Jesse. And what do you think will happen? Anybody want to guess? Okay, so what's going to happen? It's either going to be Malik or Jesse, because we already said it's not going to be Robbie, because Robbie's within the function. It's actually going to be an error message. If I understand JavaScript correctly, it should be an error message. Yeah, and the reason for that is because name has already been declared, and it's declared and initialized to Malik. So you can't do this. You can't say like, oh, let name equals Malik and then be let name equals Jesse. It's like you can't do that. However, you could do this. You could get rid of the keyword let. That simple keyword let. Now you're just you're reassigning it. You're not redeclaring it. You can only declare it once, but you can assign it multiple times. So the let name can only happen once, but the name equals can happen multiple times. So if I run it now, it should be Jesse, right? So I hope that makes sense. These little things about the order of execution and scope, that will help, like understanding that correctly will save you so much time, especially once things get a lot more complicated with frameworks, with APIs and all that stuff. It's very important to understand where what is declared, where it's being used, what the scope is, what the type is, these type of things. Okay, so we kind of deviated from function a little bit, but that's fine because the topic that we went over was kind of important. So a function, again, a set of instructions with a name. And I don't want to go into arguments just yet, but what you can do is you can have functions can also have an argument. So you can say, let's say the name comes in through an argument, right? What is an argument? It's just something you supply to the function. So let's say the function needs something in order to do its job, then you, in this case, a name, then it will just, you can just provide it with a variable called name. So now when I call on foo and I give it a name, and let's say I give it the name Roger. Anybody still called that? What do you expect to happen? Is it going to print Robbie or is it going to print Roger? And that's a tough one. I'm not going to lie. This is not an easy one. That's a tough one. Let's just run it and see what happens. Like, one of three things will happen, right? Either it will print Roger, it will print Robbie, or it will throw an error, right? One of three things. Robbie? All right, let's see. Let's just run it. Let's see what happens. An error. And that's because it has to do, it's saying like, I'm confused. Name is already there, like it's already like coming in as an argument, but then we're redeclaring it again. It's like, even though this part is confusing, and if you're new, don't think too much about it, because this part is a little bit more advanced, why this fails. But obviously, if I comment this out and run it, we should see Roger, right? Yeah, there you go. So there it is. That's an argument for a function. Simple, right? If you think about it, it's literally just supplying something to a function that the function needs. Saying like, hey, in order for me to do my thing as a function, I need certain input. In this case, foo needs name in order to do what it needs to do. Okay, so that's I think that's enough on functions. It can get very complicated, but again, it's important to stick to the basics. So let's actually, you know what? Let's do. I wanted to introduce. Crap, I don't think we're going to get to the rock paper scissors game. I was hoping to do a rock paper scissors game because that would have been. I feel like it's a good exercise for a new developer. And actually, you know what? Maybe you guys can do rock paper scissors on your own using this information. Just like this stuff right here. Try to do it with all of these that we went over, and let me introduce two more real quick. The first one is prompt. This is prompt is a very it's just getting input from the user. It's not that common, to be honest. Prompt is not that common, but it's useful in the rock paper scissors game. To you're going to need it. So what is a prompt? It's actually quite simple. If I do prompt, what is your name? And I run it. Remember this function, nothing happens there, even though there's a console log. Remember that it will not run the console log because we never called on the function foo. So that's very important to remember. Don't forget that. So this should only execute this line, none of these lines. So if I run it, it will do that, right? And let's say I put in my name. That's it. Ignore this output right here, by the way. This is specific to REPL. This is not JavaScript. So that can confuse some people. Why is it printing out your name afterwards? That is not JavaScript. That is something with REPL, the way it interprets the code. So, okay, but here's the thing. This name that I just entered, it goes nowhere. It's just I'm entering the name and then it disappears. Like I never really did anything with it. So let's save it to something. Let's do let name equals prompt. What is your name? And run it. And now I have a reference to it. Oh, that whole, interesting, that whole printing my name again afterwards disappears. So I think I know why. So what if we wanted to console log name, right? So now when I enter a name, let's try a different name. It will just console log the name. So meaning we have a reference to it. We have saved it. There's many ways to look at it, many terms for it. So I like saving. I like the idea of you're saving something because you need it for down the road. So let's do this. So this is prompt. You're going to need that for rock, paper, scissors, right? When you do your rock, paper, scissors game, if you decide to do that, then you're going to have to ask the user, hey, pick either enter either rock, paper, or scissors, right? So then let's call this choice. So you're gonna, at some point, you're gonna do something like that. It's gonna be not exactly that. It's up to you what you're gonna call choice. It's up to you what message you have or where you have the prompt statement, but you're gonna have to do something along those lines. And you're gonna, let's say you print out the choice. And then you run it, and whatever choice you have, in this case, we'll just print it. Okay, so you're gonna need that for the rock, paper, scissors. Let me see what else you need. You're gonna need, math.random, right? Because you need to, because you're playing against the computer, so you need to also pick you need to allow the computer to pick a random choice, right? How do you do that? How do you make the computer pick between rock, paper, scissors? Like, think about it. Like, how would you do that? Like, how would you program that? So you need, so the way, whenever anything related to randomness, there's a good chance you're going to use something like this, math.random. And let me show you, let me get the exact way of generating a random number. And you might be asking, why are we generating a random number? Shouldn't we generating a random string? And the reason why you're generating a random number, it's because you're going to use an array. So this is one solution, a popular solution, to allow somebody to pick a random, like in this case, to pick between rock, paper, scissors. If you wanted that to be picked randomly, you would create a variable. Let's call it game choices. So this is going to be an array. It's going to hold the choices: rock, paper, scissors. And let's say you wanted the computer to pick a random one between rock, paper, scissors. By the way, this math.floor, okay, so this math.floor generates a number between 0 and 9. This is what this means. But we don't want 0 and 9, right? What do we want? There's only 3 choices. So 0 and 2. Why 2 and not 3? Because remember that array started at 0. So 0, 1, 2. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So this way, so this whole thing will return a number between 0 and 2. Let's save this. Let's save it to something so we can use it. Because if we just call on this, the right-hand side of the equal sign, by itself, it'll be useless, right? Because it disappears. We want to save it so we can use it. So there's index, there's game choices. So if I wanted to console log the random choice that the computer made, what would I have to do? Can you guess? It's the name of the array. We have done this a couple times. Game choices, square brackets, and then the location, which in this case is a random number between 0 and 2 called index. There we go. So if let's get rid of this for a second. Let's comment this out. Remember, this doesn't get run because we never called on this. Actually, you know what? Let me just comment it out so I don't confuse people. So let's just focus on this right here. So if I run this, what do you expect to happen? It should, if we did it correctly, each time I run it, should pick between rock, paper, scissors. And let's do this real quick. So let's run it. Paper, rock, scissors. Oh, perfect. Picked each one. And okay, what would happen if I accidentally pick like the wrong number, like 2? What do you expect to happen? In this math.random, don't worry about exactly what this does. All you need to know is this picks a number between 0 and the number that you put here, not inclusive. So if I pick 2 and I run it, no, actually 2 is wrong. Let's pick 4. That's a better one. There's a good chance it will crash, right? Because it includes an index that's out of bounds. So at some point, this will crash. So this works. So far, so good. It works. And then at some point, it will probably crash. It will say, oh, there it is. Well, it didn't crash. In Java, in another language, it would have crashed. In JavaScript, I guess it's a little bit more forgiving, and it just returns undefined. So you're going to use everything that we went through today, console logs, types. We've talked about different types, variables, arrays, loops, function, prompt, and math.random to create your game, rock, paper, scissors. So if you're serious about programming, if you're serious about becoming a developer, if you want to see if you're good at it, see if you can do it, which anybody can really, if you put in the time, then this would be good exercise. It's a good exercise to get started, to test your understanding of fundamental concepts. If you need references to what we just talked about, what I recommend is you go to my favorite site, W3 Schools. They do an incredible job of keeping things simple, succinct, and just to the point. And it has all the stuff that we talked about. It has like a chapter on it. So feel free to go on let's say functions, right? Everything I talked about, I always try to, I've noticed I try to mimic these guys. These are they're very good at what they're doing. So use this as a reference. And between what I did today and W3 schools, you should be able to create a rock, paper, scissors game. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, that site is awesome. Every time I search for, it would only give rock, paper. Yeah. Every time I would search for, by the way, there's a delay in my video feed, so a lot of these comments that I see are kind of delayed. So every time I do a Google search for technical stuff and I see one of the results being W3 schools, I automatically go to that one. Like it's just my go-to place. It's just if W3 schools has an explanation for something, I definitely take it. Yeah. So I want to open it up for any questions that you guys might have at this point. Are there any questions? Anything I can do? I'm a tutor. This is what I do on a regular basis. I help people understand some of these concepts, hopefully a little bit better. And yeah, if you have any coding questions specific to what we did, or even career questions, let me know. I would, I don't mind answering them. Again, there's a delay in my video feed, so I see your answers a little bit late. Okay, so if you decide to do the rock, paper, scissors game, feel free to use REPL. You don't have to use REPL. You can develop it on your local machine, within a JavaScript file. There's many ways to do it. I like REPL. Why, overcomplicate things? Just type in REPL, JavaScript, and, it'll pull this up. I would say recommend, yeah, feel free. If you need an intro session with me, that's fine. There's a free 15-minute intro session. But it's like I said, and this is not about me plugging my services, by the way. I'm literally doing this because I enjoy it. And that's the truth. I love teaching. I love helping people to make sense of complicated things, I guess. Simplify it, because I know how it is to be a beginner developer. So I love doing this. But if you want to schedule a session, obviously feel free to do that. Just go to my site, aventutor.com. There's links there. So feel free to do that. In regards to the game, if you decide to do it, just create a function, I would say, and maybe put everything, call it game maybe, and just maybe write all the code of the game in the function. And that's because it's good programming. You don't want to have, for sure. If you need help, I'm always here on my calendar. Well, if you can select something on my calendar, then I'm available. It's that simple. You don't have to do anything else. Just whatever you need help, schedule the session. Email me specifics if it's something unusual, like if it's maybe a language or framework that's not listed on my website and you need help. Just email me first, run it by me first, just to make sure I can help. But if it's basic JavaScript, introductory stuff, web development stuff, JavaScript stuff, or Java, I can help with that. You don't need to run it by me. Anything else, run it by me first. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really, it's a few of you have joined me, and I really appreciate it. To be honest, like I said, I love doing this. So I don't care if anybody, as long as there's one person watching and learning, I'm good. I don't mind doing this. So awesome. So stay in touch. Find me on LinkedIn if you guys want to stay in touch with them, or if you need to just, like, again, if you want to schedule a session, go on my site. But yeah, awesome, cool. All right, let's stop here. Thank you so much again for watching this. I know it's a little bit unusual, but I feel like this is the future of teaching. So, all right, guys, take care. Have a great rest of the weekend. Stay safe, obviously. All right, take care. Bye.